The show revolves around the life of Ray Shoesmith, a hitman for hire who balances his criminal activities with his obligations to friends and family. He has a 7-year-old daughter, Brittany, and his ex-wife, Jacinta. Ray is also the caretaker of his sick brother, Bruce. At the start of the episode, Ray has a meeting with his boss, Freddy's associate Maddie. He questions Maddie why he didn't put the bet on Freddy's gambling initially. The guy tries to lie and wriggle his way out of the situation, but when Ray keeps on insisting, he admits his mistake. As a result, Ray teaches him a lesson by pushing him off the stairs. Later, Ray meets Freddy at a nightclub to collect his payment. His boss doesn't have the money at the moment, possibly because he lost it at gambling. So Freddy tells Ray that he can collect 10 grand from someone who owes him a debt and keep it for himself. Our hero agrees but tells his boss that he will need an extra grand to help him collect the debt. Freddy obliges and sends one of his crew, Nick, to assist Ray in collecting the debt. In the next scene, Ray and Nick drive to a place called Ashfield to find the debtor who goes by the name Terry. At first, Nick beats Terry mercilessly, but the old guy refuses to pay and claims that he doesn't have any money. He says that he can get it within a week though. Ray thinks of another way to scare poor Terry. He asks for Terry's wallet and sees the old guy's family photo. He then jots down Terry's address, threatening him by claiming that he will go to his home to apparently deal with his family instead. This frightens Terry. So he promises to return the money immediately. The next day, Ray is walking his dog in a park. There, he meets a woman named Ollie, who is also walking her dog. They have small talk and both find each other attractive. Later, Ray visits his daughter, Brittany, who lives with his ex-wife, Jacinta. He then drives his kid to visit his brother, Bruce. Uncle Bruce is very friendly with Brittany as he often spoils her with gifts. One night, as Ray is on guard duty at a nightclub, his best friend, Gary, shows up. The two engage in a private talk. And Gary says that while he was watching adult movies at home, his Russian wife, Tatiana, found out about the DVD and is angry at him. To save himself, Gary told his wife that Ray is the one who owned the port, and surprisingly, she believed his lies. Gary then asks Ray to come to his house and confirm his story to Tatiana. Although hesitant at first, our hero eventually agrees. In the next scene, Ray comes to his best friend's house and meets Tatiana. He hesitantly admits to her that the porn DVD belongs to him. Tatiana rebukes Ray and gives back the porn to him. Later, Ray throws the DVD in the trash can, but Gary picks it up and takes it back home. This is, of course, without his wife's notice. The following day, when Ray is hanging out with his daughter, Brittany, on the street, two young boys bump into her. The boys are very rude to Ray and use cuss words. After Ray takes his little girl back to the car, he sees those two boys again who are now chatting on the street. Ray tells Brittany to stay put in the car, claiming that he's going to buy some newspapers. But instead, he goes straight over to those two boys and beats one of them while the other freaks out and manages to run away. This action, however, is witnessed by a woman. While pursuing the guy who ran away, Ray comes across Ally at a supermarket and finds out that she is a paramedic. This time, Ray takes the chance to ask for her number. Cut to the next scene, a business owner, Luke Henson finishes jogging and goes back to his car. Suddenly, Ray shows up and forces him to get into the trunk of his car. Ray then takes Luke to the forest and tells him to dig a hole. While Luke is doing so, Ray kills him then and there and buries him in the same hole, which had been dug by Luke. One morning, when they're at home, Brittany asks her father if Santa Claus is real. Ray can't lie to his daughter, so he says that Santa Claus is completely fake. After Brittany asks about Jesus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy, Ray doesn't want to break his little girl's heart, so he tells her that unicorns are real. He then makes up a story about when he drove to the Blue Mountains and saw a unicorn there before it flew off. Later, some cops come to Ray's house and summon him to meet at court for beating the two young men the other day. Consequently, he is instructed to attend anger management therapy. That night, Ray goes to Freddy's nightclub, the Playhouse. Freddy informs him that Luke is not the guy they're supposed to kill. This makes Ray feel very bad about what he did, so he angrily tells his boss to give him the right name next time. Cut to the next scene, Ray goes on a lovely date with Ollie. They get to know each other and share their past. Ollie mentions her failed marriage at 21, and Ray comments that she dodged the bullet. The two end their date at Ray's place, where they get intimate with each other. The following day, Ray suddenly gets a call from the hospital. It turns out that Gary is currently in a coma. He arrives at the hospital, comforts Tatiana, and asks Gary's brother-in-law Vasily what happened. The latter reveals that it was a gun deal gone wrong. According to him, while he and Gary were conducting their illegal business, some men interrupted their meeting, bashed Gary in the head, and ran away with all the guns. As Ray listens to all this, he notices a lot of things that just don't make sense. Such as why the robbers didn't beat Vasily and why his knuckles don't have any bruises despite claiming that he beat up one of the robbers that night. Ray comes to Vasily's house, beats him, and forces him to tell the truth. The latter denies any wrongdoings at first. But when Ray threatens to kill him, he finally speaks up. He reveals that he and his associate Hassam set Gary up, but they didn't expect that the robbers would bash him this badly. Hearing this, an enraged Ray forces Vasily to call Hassam. When the guy arrives, Ray holds him at gunpoint. Out of fear, Hassam confirms the truth that the rest of the robbers beat Gary. Next up, our hero follows Hassam's information about the robbers and goes after them. He kills two of the men responsible for beating Gary. The next day, Gary wakes up from his coma and thanks Ray for taking care of him. Later, Ray visits his ex's place to spend some time with his daughter there. Jacinta berates Ray for telling Brittany that Jesus isn't real. Especially when she and her new husband have decided to raise Brittany as a Christian. In response, Ray says that he was telling the truth and that he doesn't want his child to believe in tales before driving off. After this, Ray attends the court-ordered anger management therapy session. The therapy is, in a way, okay for him since the alternative is prison. However, his first meeting didn't go very well. The room is filled with guys beating their wives and kids, which doesn't match Ray's character. Therefore, he has to speak since he doesn't just have anger issues but impulse control. When he tells the group that he doesn't belong in this room full of wife and children beaters, it gets on the nerves of another attendee. This leads to Ray almost getting into a fight with a man. But he's eventually stopped by the therapist. Unfortunately, this isn't Ray's only issue of the day. His boss, Freddy, informs him that the guys he bashed for putting Gary in a coma belonged to a crew run by his son-in-law's brother, Davros. Freddy then insists Ray sit down with Davos to smooth the waters. The next day, Vasily, while on drugs, breaks into Gary's house to rob the contents of his safe. Gary, who has just returned home from the hospital, manages to send an SOS text to Ray, who is out shopping with Ollie. Gary buys some time by giving several excuses, such as not knowing the combination for the safe. Thankfully, Ray comes to his rescue and promptly deals with Vasily. The Russian is knocked off the stairs, and during this time, Gary manages to snatch away his gun. Gary then seemingly pops a bullet in Vasily's skull. At the same time, Tatiana arrives home, sending the two friends into a state of panic. Gary tries to cut the body into pieces so that it can be easier for them to dump it while Ray tries to hide the incident from Tatiana. Unfortunately for Gary, it is revealed that the bullet had bounced off Vasily's skull, making it seem like he was dead, but in reality, he was only knocked out, so when Ray tries to chop Vasily up, the latter wakes up and runs for his life. After Gary explains what Vasily tried to do to him, Tatiana chases him out in a rage. In the meantime, Ray just walks away because he doesn't have time to deal with their family's business. Although Ray has a gangster background, he has a bit of a soft side, especially in regard to his daughter, Brittany. He often goes to her games, spends time with her, and brings her over to his brother's house so she knows where she comes from. He even introduces her to his new girlfriend, Ally. That night, Ray finally has a sit-down with Davros, Freddy's relative, and a crime boss whose men he had beaten up earlier. However, the meeting doesn't necessarily go well. Ray is clearly there as a favor to his boss, Freddy, and with Davros starting the meeting off by refusing to shake Ray's hand, he pretty much is dead to him. After all, what Ray desires the most is respect. Enraged, Davros sends 3 men after our hero. In the next scene, Ray and Ollie go out shopping in a nearby supermarket. When they're done, 2 men keep him from being able to back out of a spot in the parking lot. When they become verbally abusive to Ray, he handles the situation physically. He gets out of his car and beats them violently until they run away. Ollie is shocked to see this side of his personality. Later, when she confronts him about the recent incident, he tells her that he is only doing society a favor by punishing the bad guys. That night, Ray notices Davros' men watching his house and lures them into a remote area. When he arrives at an old and abandoned factory, he gets out of the car and readies himself with a bulletproof vest and a patched submachine gun recently gifted to him by Gary. When Davros' men arrive in their car, he opens fire and mercilessly kills them all. After his work is done, Ray returns home to Ollie, who can smell the gunpowder on him but cannot identify it. The following day, Ray and Gary plan to rob a drug dealer, and they want Nick to join them as he will be the one driving their car. Nick mentions that he is in with the plan before excusing himself to the bathroom. He tries to call someone but mistakenly drops his phone inside the toilet. Nick then tells Ray and Gary that he'll be going out to get some smokes. However, in reality, he goes to a nearby telephone booth and dials a number. Ray, who had followed him outside, catches him trying to report his partner. It turns out that Nick is actually an undercover cop as he doesn't have a gun with him. Nick gives himself up. Ray and Gary then drive him out into the wilderness, and they're stuck up on what to do with Nick. Naturally, that decision is up to Ray since Gary doesn't like getting his hands dirty. Our hero then lets Nick go because he doesn't need the trouble of a cop's death on him and because he hasn't done anything around Nick. Later, Ray is abruptly kidnapped by Dave and Bobby, 2 hitmen hired by Davros. Our sly hero manages to stall them by revealing that he has a strongbox hidden in a particular place holding more money than they're doing the job for. The hitmen privately plan to take the money and deliver it to Davros anyway. After a while, Ray leads them to a strong but claims to not remember the combination. He then suggests they buy a gas-cutting torch in a nearby hardware store so that they can get the strongbox open. Ray is told to sit inside the trunk of the car as Dave and Bobby drive up to the hardware store. As Dave buys a gas-cutting torch, Bobby leaves Ray in the trunk of their car to go buy cigarettes. When they return, they surprisingly find the car gone. The next scene shows how the car mysteriously disappeared from the parking lot. In a flashback, we see 2 petty criminals arriving in front of the store. They look around and steal Dave and Bobby's car with Ray still in the trunk. They then drive to a mechanic to sell the car. The mechanic mentions that he will give them money only once he has all the parts checked. The criminals then take away the strongbox and leave the car to the mechanic. Later, the mechanic hears some noise coming out from the car as Ray is thumping from inside for help. Since he doesn't want to get into trouble, the mechanic drives the car to a forest area and abandons it. After many attempts, Ray finally escapes from the trunk and gets into the car. He drives around and enters a takeaway restaurant where he comes across the same 2 crooks with his strongbox. He then follows them and takes away the box, only to be found and once again kidnapped by Dave and Bobby. Dave says that the plan is still on, so they drive him out into the woods to meet Davros, who has been waiting for them. After this, Ray is told to dig a graveyard nearby. Next, Davros hands Dave his share of the payment. But Bobby lets it slip that they have Ray's strongbox. Enraged, Davros demands they share the money from the strongbox with him as well as Bobby cuts it open with a gas cutter. The empty rigged strongbox explodes, injuring everyone. since Ray was a little further digging a grave as told. He is the least injured. This allows him enough time to kill Davros and Bobby. However, he leaves Dave alive out of respect. It is then revealed that Ray and Dave come from the same background. Dave just wants the money to fend for his family and his expectant wife who is soon to give birth to a baby boy. Dave says that he owes this one to Ray before scooting away. In the final scene, Ray gets a call from Ollie. And he informs her that he will be late to meet her tonight because of work obligations.